Hey everyone, and welcome to Point B, a Sibros original podcast where we talk about the latest and greatest in automotive technology. I'm Joe Borras. You probably know me as the host of CleanTechnica's Clean Tech Talk and the Electrify News podcast. And I am here today to introduce the regular hosts of this show, Michael Kara and Steve Schwinke. Now, Michael, you did a lot of work with Harman Ignite, which is basically a company that developed a lot of cloud software, brought cloud computing to the automotive space. And Steve, you're probably a little bit more well-known with the general public because you did a lot of pioneering work with GM's OnStar. Steve, why don't you start us off? Tell us a little bit about who you are, what brought you here, and what part of the automotive world is really your favorite place to be and kind of where you're most comfortable.
Thanks, Joe. I appreciate that. As you mentioned, I started my career a little bit before that, designing communication systems for fast attack subs, the defense industry, but moved back to Detroit and joined OnStar, which at the time was interesting because we were convincing people that adding embedded connectivity to mobility products was a good idea. And so there was a little bit of an uphill battle, but it did catch on quickly. You know, when you make the promise to deliver safety, security, and peace of mind to your customers, it becomes an easy sell. And so they got the core value proposition of why embedded connectivity was put in these vehicles. And there was a lot of disruption too at the time, trying to figure out a lot of technical details of how to add embedded connectivity. People forget 25 years ago, communication isn't what it was today.
That's awesome. Michael Kara is the technical solutions manager at Sibros. Everybody has an issue, a problem that they want to solve for, and you're the guy who goes in and solves those problems. Is that a fair thing to say?
Yes, that is a fair thing. What I do is I kind of bring together the technical portion along with the sales. So I'm paired with the sales team to kind of represent some of the engineering stakeholders that are there. So I do that translation from the business aspect down to the engineering aspect to make sure that good solutions are developed.
Yeah, and when we talk about these solutions, we're often talking about something that is over the air, kind of cloud-based computing. And your previous work before you came to Sibros was really pioneering in that aspect. Can you talk a little bit about how you came from your background and what kind of twists and turns brought you to Sibros?
Sure. So actually, one of the things is I've always been a car guy ever since I was a little kid. So, but I had the technical skills and the sales acumen. So how do you bring those three things together? I spent a lot of time in workflow consulting, and then eventually started making my way to the automotive industry with my move to Detroit. Once I got here, it was a matter of just trying to find how to marry those skills. And really my first foray into that was in the early days of OTA updates. With my previous employer, they did a lot of work in that space, kind of doing all the groundbreaking aspects to bring OTA to those. But then eventually I started working in automotive ecosystems because I think the auto industry started to notice what was going on in the mobile space and wanted to see how they can marry those two technologies into a vehicle. And one of the approaches of doing that was starting to work in the Android ecosystem and bringing that interface to customers' vehicles.
It's very interesting that you bring up ecosystems. I was at an event several years ago, probably almost 10 years ago now, called Further with Ford. Their conversation was, how do we create an ecosystem within our automobile that communicates with the smart home, communicates with the device, and effectively brings all of these services together and delivers a continuous, seamless experience for our customers that's going to make them effectively more loyal to us. There's a ton of challenges that came into that. And, we're living now 10 years later in the era of Internet of Things. But I think the challenges and how we got from there to here are often overlooked because it seems like, you just take your device out of your pocket and everything works. Can you guys speak to some of the early challenges and how the technology and the products you're working on at Sibros kind of overcome that and make it invisible for your customers?
One of the bigger challenges early on, I think, was connectivity. That was one of the cores, is how to bring that connectivity to a vehicle that creates the ubiquitous experience that we're accustomed to from a mobile space. Obviously, first you had issues with cellular networks in the earlier days, but as those started to grow, then what is the standards to be able to communicate back to the internet from a vehicle? And I think a lot of automakers have done a great job putting that together. But it's a lot of moving parts that happen on the backside, because it's not just one guy that's making that decision and saying, this is how we're going to do it. You have a lot of stakeholders that are involved. As we've evolved into a connected vehicle space, and as it continues to grow, managing how those connections work. You have issues that come up with security, which is probably the number one. The second one is personal information and how to protect that. And then I'd say the third pillar of that one that is of great concern is, once you have that data, how do you manage it? And how do you roll that information out to make it usable and connect to some of these external systems and ecosystems that are all vying for that vehicle data?
All right. Let me add to that too, Mike, as you talk about how OEMs are evolving. You think about the automotive industry, which has been around for 120 years, and they're very set in their ways in terms of how do you approach the customer, how do you interact with the customer, how you design and build cars. And there's two areas that really where we're focused on disruption to change that the paradigm in which they operate. The first is, if you think of your cell phone, you mentioned Apple. Can you imagine having to go back to the Apple store every time you got a software update? Right. I mean, you probably wouldn't buy a cell phone where you had to go back once a month to your selling, dealership, or not your dealership, but the store that you bought your cell phone from, and to get your software update. You do expect those software updates, those new features, to come while you're sleeping overnight. They just show up, or you download it when it's convenient for you. We think about the automobile industry. You're going into that service dealership. Well, it's painful. And what's the most precious commodity that we have today? It's people's time. So how do you save people's time? You don't make them go to the dealership anymore. You give them that convenience to update their vehicle, either correct an issue or add a new feature while they're sleeping. And the other evolution that I see happening, if I just finish one point, is the way they design and build cars, right? So you think about the design, you talk to a customer, right? And you talk to a series of customers, and you come up with ideas. What's the next thing that they want? How do they want that product to look? How they want it to design it? What are the customer needs that they're going to address with future designs? And it's all done through market research and clinical studies, as opposed to just how are people operating their vehicles today? You can get that feedback through data logging. And this is one of the things that we offer, is complete data logging, really understanding your product, how it's performing, how it's being used, and what are the future designs you can take advantage of, or what are the things that you should be adding to your vehicles by understanding how your vehicles are using your product today. That can be fed back into that life cycle. And there's more evolution that's taking place with adding embedded connectivity to vehicles.
So beyond the challenge from the design point of view, I think there's also technical challenges of how to, as you say, be reductive and get one thing to do multiple things. And I think, Michael, that's kind of in your wheelhouse to figure out the more technical solutions, right?
Yes. I mean, when you get into looking at the data, obviously it was born from engineering needing to look at that information. But there's other stakeholders that are involved in the vehicle design process. You have marketing, you have drivers' wishes, you have dealership community, and being able to look at that data from different perspectives and from those different stakeholders truly brings a well-rounded view to what solutions drivers ultimately need and want. It's not just about the engineering design and reductive design. I think it also introduces how to comply with regulatory compliance. As we've seen over the last decade or so, government's getting a lot more strict about how drivers interact with their vehicles. For a long time, screens were flat out banned in vehicles and could not be put in because people were spending far too much time with their noses planted in there. So you raise a very good point about measuring how those features are being used and being able to change those features to address safety and compliance issues by region, by country, even globally.
You mentioned the word opportunity, and I think that was really great. One of the things that you guys are going to be talking about here on Point B as the show goes on is micromobility, interconnectivity, vehicle-to-vehicle connectivity. Are you seeing a a desire, a push to have these different systems communicate with each other to keep people safe?
Yeah, I think that, this is dovetailing into what I consider the true value add of 5G technology. Everyone talks about low latency, high speed data, but there's a communication that's enabled through 5G called PC5 communication. And I equate it to Bluetooth on steroids, basically devices to devices talking to each other. And so perception is expensive on automobiles today, where you detect, things that are out there. There's a lot of work going on with LiDARs and camera vision sensors and things like that. And then you have to actually decide what that image is and what it's doing. Or you can just have two devices talk to each other and warn each other about what's going on. And so I think we're a few years away from, broad implementation, but this is the part of 5G that I'm most excited about, is how do you get things to communicate with each other and do it so that it ultimately results in better safety for everyone on these roadways.
5G introduces higher bandwidth, lower latency connectivity. That's probably the key. Everyone's familiar with how fast they can get data to their phones with LTE 4G, and what the difference is between that and 2G. You see the difference, that obviously more bandwidth, more speed, and receiving it quicker and being able to send it quicker makes all the difference in the world. The other part, I think, is also a challenge with some of these sensors, which still needs to be built out, is how those vehicle networks inside those cars can speak to the various sensors that are in there. It's only been recent that you started to see OEMs starting to do full vehicle updates and having all that CAN information where they can grab it on demand. And different OEMs are at different levels of that implementation. Everybody sees the requirement of going there, but it's not going to be ubiquitous until you start seeing all OEMs start getting full vehicle connectivity, full vehicle communications, all connected to the cloud, to where then you can do the V2V, the V2X type environments. So there's still work that needs to be done there. And as each OEM starts to discover their path and which way they need to go, we'll start seeing those types of technologies starting to roll out more and more.
Guys, this is all fascinating stuff, and every question and answer kind of leads me to like 10 more questions, and there's no way that we're going to talk about all of this stuff and get all these answers in one episode, which is probably why this is going to be an ongoing series, right? So we've talked a little bit about kind of the industry, about Sibros' role in that, about how this is all going to unfold, and some of the topics we're going to be talking about down the road. Let's talk a little bit about the people that we're going to be discussing those topics with. So Steve, we've been talking here a little bit. I know you're a DJ. You've got a great sense of humor. You've kind of got your office set up there like you're standing in front of the stage at the Improv. Tell us a little bit about yourself and, give us a taste of what we can expect on these upcoming episodes of Point B.
Yeah, no thanks, Joe. I've been in the automobile industry for a long time. I'm actually started as a wireless engineer. I'm still a wireless engineer at heart. But what really drives me around adding embedded connectivity to transportation, as a service type of industry really is twofold. It's driven by that we need to develop transportation services for a more sustainable future, right? And so we see the transition to EV. What's after EV? I mean, how do we reduce our dependency on fossil fuels is a big thing for me. So my role in that is I want to provide insights, deep insights into new vehicle technology that's coming out, and not just to a small group, but to the entire organization that has to come together to build these transportation products. How do we give them deep insights into how these systems that they're designing are performing and what can they do to improve them?
That's great stuff, Steve. Michael, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? I know you've got a pretty good sense of humor as well.
You can call it an unusual sense of humor. Yes, that is about accurate. So what got me involved in the automotive industry was really trying to marry two different passions of mine. One was automotive. Ever since I was a little kid, I was fascinated by cars. but then also technology. And my generation is the one that really started the internet in a commercial sense. My first time on the internet was in 1989, where I was presented with a prompt and really didn't know what to do when I paid $20 to a college kid who gave me his login for an hour. So taking those two technologies and bringing them together is what really kind of drives me. There was a time that I actually installed a PC in my car in the late 90s because somebody stole my CDs and I didn't have a way to play my music anymore. So I put a computer in the back of the car so that wouldn't happen again.
Yeah, that was the thing.
So seeing... Absolutely. A full ATX computer and trying to convert from 12-volt DC to AC was a real challenge. And then every time you turn the key, it would cut the computer and you had to wait 3 minutes for it to boot, 5 minutes, whatever it was for mechanical hard drives.
The first car that I took to SEMA in 1997 had a Hewlett Packard, I think, PC in there. So that is just awesome to hear. And, Steve, you're a DJ. Like, I know we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about cars and automotive tech, but this has got to be something in your wheelhouse.
Yeah. I got into DJing because I started tailgating and started buying bigger and bigger speakers. And then my kids gave me a mixing board for Christmas. And I downloaded Serato DJ and then Fruity Loops and started doing some mixing. And the next thing I know, more and more people are showing up at my tailgates at U of M and at Michigan State. I don't really care where I DJ as long as I got a crowd.
Steve, Mike, this is all really great stuff. Thanks so much for inviting me to be a part of this pilot episode here for Point B. I can't wait to listen to future episodes. I know it's going to be really great stuff. And for those of you listening here, thanks so much. And be sure to tune in for future episodes of Point B.
Thank you for tuning in to Point B. Join us next time for more auto tech innovations and trends. Point B is brought to you by Sibros.